Thank you for joining us. This is Sunday School with Miss Wesley. Howdy, howdy. I am so glad you've taken the opportunity to click on this video, whether you're expanding your knowledge in the Bible or you're a Sunday School teacher looking for a new and exciting lesson. We are in our theme of blazing hot for God. And last week, this is lesson 2. And last week we learned about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And this week, we're learning about the flaming bush. So let's get started. For all of you that are familiar with the story, I'm sure you already know where we're going. But those of you that are just beginning and learning, this story takes place in Exodus. It takes place in the 3rd chapter and the 4th. And I'll give you a little backstory before we start. Okay, so the Israelites, or you know them as the Jews or the Hebrews, have been in Egypt for 400 years under the oppression of the Egyptians. This means they were enslaved for 400 years to the Egyptians. They were treated very, very poorly. And so, in fact, they were poor. And so God had heard their prayers, and for generations, they had heard that God was going to free them from the Egyptians and take them to the promised land, where they will be rose up to be their own nation, which is where Israel is now. So, after 400 years, Pharaoh, the leader of Egypt, noticed that there was an abundance of Israelites. And they were afraid, he and his government were afraid that one day they would be too many of them and they would overtake them. So they put out a decree that all males of the Hebrews would be killed from 3 and under. So he had his armies to go out and look for kids. He even had people to spy on the people around them to see if there was kids, males, and if they were found, they were killed. So Moses' mom managed to save Moses when he was a baby by hiding him. And one day, she knew she couldn't hide him any longer, so she put him in a raft, in a little thing she made with reeds, and sent him down the Nile, and lo and behold, he ends up in the house of Pharaoh. So, Moses, he grows up, and one day he sees a Egyptian herding. Mind you, when when Pharaoh's daughter saw Moses, she didn't realize that his sister Miriam was watching Moses. And Moses' sister, when Pharaoh asks, she comes out of the reeds where she was hiding, and Pharaoh's asks, who's going to help me bring up this child, because he's a Hebrew. And Moses' sister Miriam goes and gets Moses' mother. So Moses was raised in the house of Pharaoh with his mother being his nursemaid. So in a way, Moses knew who he was. And one day he was out in a chariot where he was walking about, and he seen one of the Egyptian guards being mean, being cruel to one of his fellow kinsmen, to a Hebrew. And Moses got mad and killed this guard. And Moses, fearing what would happen, Moses buried the guard in the sand, and still feared that one day that he was going to get found. Moses fled Egypt and went into the desert. Well, Moses stayed in the desert for a number of years, and he had gotten married. He moved on with his life, and one day he was watching his father-in-law's flocks of sheep in the desert, and he sees the most peculiar thing. He sees a bush on fire. Now, that's not the peculiar part. You see, in the desert, it's not uncommon to see bushes just, something sparks and you got dry land and dry wood and you got fire. But what Moses noticed was because even though it was on fire, the flames didn't consume the wood. The bush was still alive. The fire wasn't killing the bush. The bush was still thriving. Well, God has sent the angel of the Lord to start this fire in this bush to get into Moses' attention. And when Moses seen this bush, he goes and explores it because it piqued his curiosity. But as he gets to the bush, the voice of God says, "Moses, Moses." And Moses says, instead of backing away in fear and running for his life, Moses says, "Here I am." And so God talks to Moses and tells him he's on holy ground. He should take off his shoes. So Moses follows God's command, and through the story, I'm not going to go all into all what God says to Moses and what, because that's just part of the lesson. See, God talks to Moses and he tells Moses, "I want you to go to Egypt. I want you to deliver my people out of Egypt and to help and to guide them to the promised land which was foretold to your ancestors." And Moses says, "I don't think I could do that, God. Who am I going to say sent me? Tell them I am. I am the God of your fathers, of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. I am. I was like, okay. So, I don't think I could do this, God. I mean, how do you reckon I, prove that you're God? I'm probably messing up the sequence here, but I mean, so God tells Moses to go to Pharaoh, deliver his people, and God's going to perform, and Pharaoh's going to say no. Pharaoh's going to say, "No, you no go." And God said, "Then I'm going to perform some wonders. And I need you to go to Egypt, gather the elders of the children of Israel, and tell them what I'm going to do." And Moses says, "How am I going to prove who you say you are, because you're telling me who you're the great I am, but how am I going to show them that you are who you are? Well, God says, you have a stick in your hand, throw it down. Throw down your rod, Moses. So Moses threw down his rod. He went to pick it back up. And it turned into a snake when he threw it down. And Moses was like, what? And God says, pick it up by its tail. So Moses reached down, picked up the stick, the rod that he herded his sheep with. When he picked it back up, it turned back into a rod. It's like, okay. And God said, now stick your hand into your shirt. Pull it out. When Moses pulled out his hand, it was covered in leprosy. I think we've covered leprosy before, but it's a flesh-eating bacteria stuff. It's very gross, disgusting. If you ever want to look it up, do it on your own time. I'm not showing you pictures. It was gross. I'm so glad they have a cure for it now. And not a pretty picture. So, Moses puts his hand is covered in leprosy now. As God says, now stick your hand back into your shirt. He put his shirt, pulled it back out, hand was clean. Fresh as the day he was born. Good and clean. I was just like, okay, I can prove now. But God, I don't think I could do this. I don't talk well. If you don't know, Moses had a stuttering problem. He had a difficulty speaking, particularly certain words. So God says, okay, we're going to put an end to all these excuses. Your brother, yes, Moses had a brother, Aaron. I'll send him with you, and he will speak for you, if that's a problem. You see, this entire story, so Moses was run out of excuses. Moses did follow God's commandment. After every excuse got squashed by God, and if you want to continue the story from there, you can. This story is a very interesting story of how God uses somebody you wouldn't normally pick, because Moses killed somebody, but God has a way of picking people and putting them in positions that they need to be in to begin with. Moses had acute knowledge of the inner workings of the palace of Pharaoh. He knew how to conduct himself. He knew how to go in there. He knew how to talk to Pharaoh. Pharaoh knew who Moses was. See, God knew how to work all that out. And even though Moses felt himself to be imperfect, like God could have picked someone better to do this, God seemed the most perfect person for this exact moment. See, in our own lives, the burning bush is not just Moses' thing, it's all of our thing. See, we all have this inner fire in us, and it's God's fire. The moment you get saved, you get this little fire, and it burns bright, and it doesn't consume like the fire, just like the fire that was on the bush. It never consumed the bush, but it was a fire, and God spoke through the fire to Moses. Inside our hearts, we have a fire, and it burns bright. And through that fire, God speaks to us. And you're like, oh, there goes that crazy Christian person saying God speaks to them. Yes, God does speak to you. And it's not like a booming voice. But if you've had experience, you know the voice of God. It kind of like, you feel your hair raise on your arms, and you feel just this overwhelming presence, and it does kind of feel like fire. And he talks to you just like Moses, and sometimes, more often than not, he gives you, just like Moses, guidance, a direction, a commandment, you shouldn't be doing that kind of thing. And each of us, this bush, it burns bright and it shines gloriously unless you don't take care of it. But even then, the fire's still there. It never goes out. This continuous presence of God never ends. And this flame of God that comes to you and speaks to you, it is encouraging. And every time you come up with an excuse like Moses, God knows how to squish all those excuses like bugs. And it's your choice, because even after God gave Moses that commandment, Moses didn't have to do it. It's a free will choice. Isn't that beautiful that God gives us free will choice? No matter how badly it needs to get done, God has a way of, even if we say no, God has a way of finding someone that will say yes. But God also has a way of knowing who is just the right person for the job. And more often than not, we would see them as flawed individuals, like each and every one of us. I guarantee each and every one of us is broken. Each and every one of us is flawed. Each and every one of us has messed up more times than we could count. And yet God's flame burns brightly, and he chooses to use us in such a glorious manner. It is truly wonderful. The flame of God that speaks to us, talks to us, comforts and guides us. And that's just wonderful how beautiful it truly is. So, I hope that lesson was easy to understand. The flame of God that burns in your heart. And sometimes it's just as simple as singing a song. Sometimes it's as complicated as running a country. But I hope that you listen to the flame of God, whatever it might be, and don't turn it away, and do take care of it. And we will learn more about that as we continue in our lessons. So, let me get our project real quick. This is our little flaming bush. My Sunday school class enjoyed this. It is a lot of work, so if you want to cheat, I would not blame you. This is a very time-consuming project. Alright, what you need is, I'll show you the back side because I lost my example. It probably got consumed by a dog. Yeah. Anyhow, what you want is you want to make little bushes. You see? Or if you want, you could cheat and just go on the internet and print it off. And then you want to take a piece of card paper, glue it to the back of your bushes. Alright? You want to do that before you put the leaves on. And then you want to take some green paper and or again, you could cheat and just get the bushes already made on the computer. And then you want to make little leaves. And then you take your leaves, you glue it on your trees, and then you make your flames. I just did them by hand. I'll show you the back. Again, I just did them by hand, and I just folded them in half, the pieces, and then just cut them like you would do for a snowflake. And then you take you do red, orange, and yellow. And if you want, you could also just have the kit do outlines yourself and then just have the kids cut them out. And then you glue it all together. And then you wait for everything to dry or halfway dry. And then after that, you want to take all the way through here, because you want to go from the top halfway down, and from the bottom, I'm going to do it this way. From the bottom, you want to go halfway up. And then you slide it together. See? Awesome, right? And then you take your flame. You gotta maneuver it. If you have a big class, it's just for you ask for assistance, because unless you have kids that don't ask a lot of questions, you're going to get a lot of, "Can you help me?" Alright. Then you take this. I get on the right side. Boom. I might have to go down a little further on that one. But you get the idea. And then you have your little flaming bush. Ta-da! Now I made it simple, but all the little pieces, time consuming. Honestly, you could take a little time out of each day and do them. Or, like I said, you could just go on the computer, print off some white paper and do it that way. Just either way you want to do it, or just have the kids make their own little leaves. Any way you want to do it. That's for this week's lesson. Next week, we're going to be learning about the flame and the oil. I love you guys. God loves you, and there is nothing you can do about it. So remember, no matter where you are in this life, you are loved. Goodbye.